What's up? What's happening? We're back from Indianapolis. I'm back in the chair, back on your radio, back in your earballs. It's the Hoffman Show. Craig Hoffman with you here on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. The show that told you that the Kentucky cornerback, Max Hairston, was going to fly at the NFL Combine. Anthony Haney, super producer of this radio program. Did you see what Maxwell Hairston ran at the NFL Combine after I told you he was going to fly at the NFL Combine?
That boy ran a sub 4.3.
Sure did. He ran a 4.29. We'll see what he runs in his second time through. But yeah, Max Hairston, 4.29. What's up? We know things. And actually, Anthony, that leads into our main story today, because do you know, you remember how I knew that? What the reporting that I did? I got sources and stuff, but this was one that I told you how I garnered this information.
Was this through somebody out there in Indianapolis?
It wasn't in Indy. This was my trip that I took before Indy. Now, this wasn't a reporting trip, but it turned into kind of a reporting trip. And it was because I went and visited Exos, the premier training facility out in Arizona, whose headquarters is in Arizona. They have a Georgia location as well. And I've gotten to know the folks out there over the years. And it's like fitness Disneyland. And they do more than just NFL Combine training. But Rachel had never seen it before. I've been out there a couple times. And I was like, oh, let's go to Exos while we're in Phoenix for the weekend. And I can show you around. And we'll say hi to some folks. And as I'm walking around Exos, they're telling me about some of the guys. And sure enough, they're like, by the way, we don't think he's going to break Xavier Worthy's record, but he might challenge it. Like that dude is going to fly. And I was like, what's his name? Okay, Max Hairston. Got it. And I haven't said this part into a microphone yet, but you want to know who else I saw when I was out there?
An AZ?
Yeah, at Exos.
Is he a part of the Combine?
He's not a part of the Combine, but he's today's top story, and we might soon be wondering if he's going to be a commander.
Oh, you saw Deebo Samuel.
Deebo Samuel was out there working out. Indeed. Now, I wasn't on a reporting trip, and I was there as a friend of folks, so I wasn't going to go up to Deebo and be like, hey, you want to be a commander? I wasn't going to be rude. That wasn't my purpose in being there. But we learned today, courtesy of Fox Sports' Jordan Schultz, who, am I going to pull the cheap shot, Anthony? Sure am. He stopped yelling at Ian Rappaport in the Indianapolis JW Marriott Starbucks long enough. How do you yell at another reporter in front of all the other reporters and NFL executives when your dad is the founder of Starbucks?
It's crazy.
Talking about a little too comfortable. Anyway, Jordan Schultz, who, on top of yelling at Ian Rappaport in the JW Marriott and Indianapolis Starbucks, is a Fox Sports NFL insider, reports that the Commanders and Texans have, quote, significant interest in Deebo Samuel. This is, I guess, an escalation, if you will, of some of the previous reporting. Like, we'll see. They sniff around a little bit. But this is okay. Well, there seems to be maybe some connections. Now, obviously, Houston and that staff, D'Amico, former defensive coordinator with Kyle in San Francisco, he's very well aware of what Deebo Samuel is, who he is, kind of his locker room, all that kind of stuff. And the question is going to be, what do they think about the tape? What do they think of him as a player at this point in his career? But Deebo last year played in 15 games. He had 81 targets, 51 catches for 670 yards, 3 touchdowns. But I think the thing that's interesting about his season last year is the lack of rushing. I mean, he's had one great season. 2021, Deebo Samuel makes the Pro Bowl. He's a first-team AP All-Pro. He's never made the Pro Bowl again. He's never had a season like that again. In that season, he had 1,400 yards receiving. He's never had over 1,000 in any other season. Also in that season, he had 365 yards rushing. The past 2 years, his second and third best seasons as a rusher, he had 232 yards and 225 yards. Last season, his rushing success rate plummeted. 2 years ago, it was 67%, and he averaged 6.1 yards a carry. In his prime years, 2021 through 2023, he averaged 6.2, 5.5, 6.1 yards a rush. Last year, he averaged 3.2. So the question of what Deebo still has left in the tank and how you can get the most out of him are very much up in the air. I know that was a lot of numbers, but obviously significant drop-off in production last year. And outside of that 2021 season where he was the feature of that offense, it has never quite been the same. Now, contractually, here's where we are with Deebo Samuel. He has 1 year remaining on his contract this year. So if you acquire him for 2025, it's his age 29 season. He has his contract's complicated. Long story short, for San Francisco, he is a $15 million cap hit. His signing bonus is $4.8 million. He's got a restructure proration 3.9, a roster bonus here, option bonus. He's got a bunch of stuff. Basically, he's real cheap for another team. He's expensive to keep for San Francisco. Now, because of that, he's going to want a new deal. So he's going to want more guaranteed money, and I would frankly be willing to give him a 2-year deal with some amount of guarantees and the flexibility that if you cut him next year, like if you tell me I got Deebo Samuel on a 2-year, $20 million deal with 15 guaranteed, I'm up with that. Now, I don't know if he'll go for that, but if it's going to get him a ton of new money, he probably would. But if you do a 2-year deal, $5 million base each season, $10 million signing bonus, the second year is non-guaranteed. So it's $5 million in dead cap if you want to move on after the season, but only $5 million base salary, something like that. Or maybe the base salary is even lower next year. 2 years, $20 million, $10 million signing bonus, $2 million base salary next year, $8 million this year. So he's a $13 million cap hit this year for you, which for a number 2 wide receiver, not bad at all. And then next year, he could be an $8 million cap hit guy for you. Sick. Or a $7 million cap hit guy for you. And if you want to cut him, you save less money. Or you could push, actually what you probably do is you push more of the salary money, the base money into next year, make his base low this year. He gets the signing bonus cash. He's happy because he gets more cash. And if you want to say it's $8 million next year base salary plus the $5 million signing bonus proration, you would save $8 million if you cut him after this season. And I know that was a lot of math, so I'm just going to stop talking. But the point is, you got some options. You can give him some new cash. You can move some things around. And I would give up probably like I don't know, I'd probably go a 5th or a 6th for Deebo because he gets you juice in the offense. And the other thing about Deebo is he is a commander in the way that they want to be physical. They want to have power. They want to run through people. They want to be like just that attitude team that grinds on you. And Deebo provides you another way to run the football, someone who can run your screen game really well, someone who can hit some of the jet sweeps and some of the things they did with Diami this year at an even higher level. And if they think that he's still got more left in the tank than he showed last year and his body is not starting to break down like it appears to, and they can get more out of him in the same way they got more out of Zach Ertz, they got more out of Bobby Wagner, they got more out of a number of veteran players. Austin Eckler, like Austin had the concussion, but he didn't have any of the hamstring issues. He didn't have any of the ankle issues. He didn't have any of that stuff. So if they feel like they can do that with Deebo, manage him in the way that they manage those other vets, he's still 29. I know he's in 29 in the way that a running back is 29. So I wouldn't want to give him a ton next year in case he really is cooked. But that's a swing I would be willing to take for a late round pick. I do also wonder if San Francisco is interested in John Allen. Could that be a potential, like Deebo and a 6th for John and a 5th? San Francisco gets the better pick. They also get John Allen. That could be in play. So these are the kinds of things that are being bantied about, and we are efforting to get one of the NFL's insiders on, someone who know a little bit more about this at 5 o'clock. So if we get that, we will tell you then. The other big news story of the day is that the first and biggest piece in the quarterback market has fallen. We'll give you the latest on Matthew Stafford and what it means for the rest of the league next on the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and always live on the free Odyssey app. We're streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980, and we just talked a little bit about Deebo Samuel. Hopefully, we'll have someone else, expert, insider, analyst, to talk about Deebo a little bit later in the show. Also, should let you know, the whole show today is like insanely loaded because I brought back so many things from Indianapolis. By things, I mean interviews, content, and we will get to that here in a few. Starting with our NFL drafts experts on the half hour. I know, Anthony, how can someone compete with a name like that? NFL draft experts on the half hour. Which our boss told us no one knows what I guess he said bottom of the hour. So I said the half hour. People know what a half hour is. It's 30 minutes.
Yeah.
So 4:30, 5:30, and 6:30 today, we're going to play interviews that I recorded in Indianapolis in person, sat down with three of the three biggest entities covering the NFL. NFL Network / NFL.com, ESPN, and The Athletic. I sat down with the top draft analysts for each one of them. And we're going to play them at 4:30, 5:30, and 6:30 today. We're going to start in 10 minutes with ESPN's Matt Miller. At 5:30, we're going to have Dane Brugler. At 6:30, Lance Zierlein, NFL.com. They're all unbelievable. Like, they're so locked in on this draft class. There's a reason they're three of the best. And I can tell you, like, the interviews are awesome because sometimes I feel bad. I'm going to admit it. Anthony, sometimes we play things that I taped as if they were live. Oh no. Deception. I can't fake these. I'm not in Indianapolis anymore. I'm sitting in my house, in my studio in my house. But at 4:30, 5:30, and 6:30. What was that?
So the content is still good, though.
But the content is amazing. So you definitely want to hear 4:30, 5:30, 6:30. You want to hear those interviews on the draft class with Matt Miller starting in 8 minutes, Dane Brugler about an hour and change from now, and then 2 hours from now, Lance Zurlein. I also talked with Cynthia Freeland. We also have Clinton Yates on the show today. And as I said, we're efforting another one of the insiders or someone from San Francisco who can tell us a little bit more about the Deebo Samuel situation. But something that we'll talk about with Clinton as Mr. LA, as well as we'll talk about amongst ourselves now, is Matthew Stafford has restructured his contract and is going to stay in Los Angeles. And this is pretty interesting because I didn't know that this was going to move this quickly. But it also kind of makes sense that, hey, in the in the NFL, like, things tend to get done around the combine. One, because the league year's around the corner and teams are trying to make decisions. And two, a lot of the decision makers are in Indy. All the agents are in Indy, so they have these kinds of conversations. And my guess is that Jimmy Sexton, who's Matthew Stafford's agent, went around Indianapolis and was talking to other teams, and he probably didn't like what he heard. That he was like, okay, what kind of contract will you give my guy? And he was also probably looking at the options, like teams like the Giants who were interested. And he probably went back to Stafford, was like, hey, here's what we got. And Stafford was probably like, that sucks. Let's figure it out with the Rams. Or at some point, the Rams came back and were like, actually, we did some reconnaissance and we don't like our other options. So we actually the deal that you want, we're going to do it. But at the end of the day, I think this is the right move for LA, presuming that this contract doesn't push too much dead money into the future. Because the Rams have this kind of weird two-timeline thing going. They are good enough to win right now. They were good last season. They were good in the playoffs when they gave the Eagles the best run for their money that anybody gave them. I mean, Washington played them okay, and then the turnovers just mounted, and obviously we saw the score get way out of hand. But that game felt closer than the scoreboard, and the Chiefs got absolutely dump-trucked. But the Rams, they're driving to beat the Eagles late in the game. And then Stafford, gets sacked. Jalen Carter makes a big play, and then it's kind of over. But they're driving, and the Rams had the ball, and a touchdown wins it. That's big time. It shows you can compete, and their defense is really young and only going to get better. they've got some young pieces on offense. Their center was a rookie. They've got some pieces. Puka is young. And eventually, those guys are going to get real expensive. But for right now, there's a lot of money available in the short term. Short term as in next year, next 2 years. And so, assuming they can restructure Stafford's contract where the money doesn't get pushed too far out, maybe you can help your cap situation a little bit this year, go make a couple of moves, sign a guy or two, and you can go compete. They got to obviously figure out what they're doing with Cooper Kupp. Can they replace him? Because it's not like, oh, okay, we're trading Cooper Kupp because we got a million receivers that we need to give reps to. They have some guys they like, but it's not like a crazy receiver room. They need to go figure out. I think they're probably moving on from Cooper Kupp because they want someone who's more reliable on the injury front, and they don't think Cooper's it. So, and from a financial standpoint, his contract is at a point where it makes sense for them, right? If you are acquiring Cooper Kupp, you still have the same injury risk, but they also, the acquiring team, which could be Washington for sure, does not take on the full brunt of the contract. Or if they cut him, they can sign him to a new, cheaper contract. And they feel like they can build it out. And they don't have to pay Colby Turner yet, but they're going to soon. They're going to have to pay Fisk and Jared Verse eventually. But for right now, if you can compete and get those guys even more playoff experience, and the other, I think, last part of this is, sure, Jimmy Garoppolo could probably help them win some games in the end. Like, Jimmy Garoppolo is competent enough, and the offense that Sean McVay runs is similar to the old stuff that Jimmy ran in San Francisco, that they could probably be pretty good. Like, they're a run-first team with Kyron Williams, who, by the way, they've got to extend this offseason. And that's going to be good enough to help them compete in the NFC West. But obviously Stafford takes them to a different level. And Jimmy, the problem is he's going to be good enough, and the defense is good enough, and the run game is good enough, and the O-line's good enough that it's not like you're going to be able to then pick at the top of the 2026 draft. So you're going to be stuck picking later. There's no obvious replacement for Stafford. Until you can figure that part out, why not just keep Matthew Stafford? And if you're going to, either be committed to, we're probably going to be really bad, we'll try our best, we'll develop our young players, and we'll see what happens, hopefully, to get a quarterback in the near future, like a year from now. Or we have a path to get one right now. Like, if you like this, let's say they love Cam Ward, that everyone else is like, Cam Ward would never go or never go near the top of another draft, like whatever. They're like, I don't know what everyone else is talking about. We love Cam Ward, and we think that we can get him at 3, or that we can get from 3 to 2 or 3 to 1 to get Cam Ward if we trade with the Giants. Okay. Make that move. Make that trade. Have an avenue to get the next guy. I don't think they have an avenue to get the next guy. And if you don't have an avenue to get the next guy to go with your young guys, and you're good enough to compete right now, why not just compete right now? And that's exactly what they're doing. I think that's a smart move by LA. And so that's why ultimately they go in that direction. We'll talk about this more with Clinton Yates later on in the show. But next, ESPN's Matt Miller on the 2025 NFL Draft Class, the first of our draft experts every half hour on the hour here on the Hoffman Show. Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We're streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980, where you see Matt Miller, ESPN. You and Jordan are the only guys that go around this in suits. Is that like an ESPN thing?
No,
Is this?
This isn't a humble brag, I promise.
Yeah.
I have to immediately go to TV after this, and we have to wear suits on TV.
Fair enough.
So that's all it is.
I mean, that honestly.
I'm not that comfortable in suits. I'd rather be in like joggers and a hoodie. But the TV people, man, they make you wear a suit.
TV people want you to look like a TV person on
Exactly.
TV. Imagine that.
Yeah.
What a damn shame. That's why you should stay in radio. Okay, maybe there's other reasons to go into television. We don't talk about that right now. Matt, we're going to talk about the NFL draft. So this class lines up very interestingly for Washington because I think at the end of the first round, like even though like the cornerback position is kind of a funky one this year, the wide receiver group, like all these position groups, D-line, O-line, that are their top needs, might be actually where you want to be in that. Is that how you see this class?
No, absolutely. And I think, with Washington, by the way, who would have thought a year ago we would be talking about
we're gonna get
at
there,
the
don't
end
you
of the
worry.
first round,
Yeah.
right? It's a good problem to have.
For sure.
I do think the team's needs line up well with this draft class and where those stacks are going to happen because like we don't know how many receivers are going to be off the board at that point of the draft, right? Because there's just not that excitement about the position this year like last year where we thought there might be 6 receivers off the board before this point. And in fact, there were. So same with the corner group, especially Travis Hunter exists in his own world. Let's take him out of it for a second.
He's off the board in one of those.
Right. So it's like if you the rest of the corner class, it's like, okay, Will Johnson's going to go somewhere in the top 11 or 12.
Yeah.
And then, like, do the receiver and corner as your ideal round 1 targets, the board should line up great for you.
Is there one of those position groups that you like more, either more than others, or like if you compare them to each other, you're like, actually kind of really like this edge class, receiver class, corner, O-line. Those are the 4.
I love the edge class. Love the edge class. I think it's elite. It's a great year, not just because Abdul Carter, but Jalen Walker and Mykel Williams, and there's just so many great players at the edge this year. And there's a mixed bag, right? There's guys who've had great production in college, and there's guys who have great traits like Shamar Stewart and Mykel Williams, and we're going to see, I think, a really good week from those guys testing here. But edge is also deep, so it's really good at the top. We see a lot of first-round guys, but then it's deep. So I think you get quality starters in round 2, quality starters in round 3 even.
Is there a guy that has enough pass rush juice outside of Carter that you think he could be a 1? Because, like, getting the guy who's your 2-3 guy, your Dorrance Armstrong, for instance, in Washington, like, I won't say it's not hard, but, like, it's a lot easier than finding a premier edge guy, which is really kind of what they need, which is why they're all in on Myles Garrett and all the talk there. Is there a guy amongst that group that you think could get there?
I think Jalen Walker could get there from Georgia. He's undersized is the key. So I think scheme's going to matter a lot for him. His teammate, Mykel Williams, has all the traits to get there. He said today, I think he played at 60% this past year at Georgia. If that was 60%, my goodness. Like, that's the guy you want.
Noted.
6'4", 260. And you watch him against Texas, and he had 4 sacks in 2 games, and you think, this is the greatest thing ever.
Yeah.
But he had 1 sack the rest of the season against non-Texas opponents. And so it's just, can you get that consistency? When you find out he was hurt all year, it makes a little bit more sense.
Matt Miller, ESPN NFL draft analyst with us here on the Hoffman Show. So the question I am purposefully asking everyone is, with what Washington did this year and the unexpected success that they had, is there something that you either learned about team building or a way you can find success in the NFL, or like extremely clarified for you because of what Adam Peters and that group did?
Yeah, I think a couple things. Number one is when you draft a quarterback and intend to play them, make sure you have an offensive coordinator who knows how to develop and build a game plan for a young quarterback. Chicago Bears, I'm talking to you. It's just
I got in so much. Bears fans got in trouble with me this year because they decided to run their mouth and then the Hail Mary happened. So you can talk all the smack to Bears fans you want on this show.
And I love Caleb Williams and I love the Chicago Bears, but they didn't have that plan that Washington had with Cliff.
Yes.
Cliff's experience with college quarterbacks, Cliff's experience with Kyler Murray, that mattered. And I think that's a lesson NFL teams have to learn coming out of this. On the Adam Peters side of things, it's like, dude, just draft good football players. Like, can we stop drafting guys who are athletes that don't play football? And let's just draft good football players who happen to be good athletes. Even like Johnny Newton. Johnny was a great football player. And maybe he didn't fit all the metrics that people wanted for the position, but he's just a really, really good interior pass rusher. Brandon Coleman, same way. Like, he's just good
I was
going
to ask you along that, like, don't draft athletes that aren't good football players. Like, how do you then make sense of that statement with a guy like Coleman, who is still super raw athletically?
Yeah.
He actually was not a very experienced football player. He was a guy who didn't start playing until, late high school,
Right.
JUCO, et cetera. So, like, what is it about him and what you saw last year that you were like, no, that guy, even though he's raw, still football player, still fits the Peters model?
For me, it was his poise. With everything that was thrown at him, he never looked panicked, especially early in the season when he was thrown out there. And I think the thing with Brandon, like, he was a 4th-round pick, right?
Third
Third-round pick. Like, that's where you want to do that. That's where you want to take a guy that maybe needs some developing, but you're betting on the athletic upside. Instead of taking a tackle like that in the first round,
Right.
you know, who, like, Mekhi Becton has turned into a good offensive guard, but, like, don't draft guys like that in the top 10. You know, they should not be put in those positions that early on. So, but I think, like, this job is always evolving, you know, as the league evolves and as things change. But I think one thing that we're seeing from the Rams and the Eagles and the Ravens and, you know, the Bills and Chiefs is drafting guys who are ready to play early. Like, there's some benefit to that. Like, what is the hit rate? It's low, 33% in the first round.
Which is crazy because these guys spend their entire years trying to decide, like, what is going to work. They study. This is literally their livelihood. They're very well compensated. They're very well resourced, and they're still hitting it 33%.
So if your hit rate's 33% in the first round, would you rather take a swing at a guy that you've watched play really well for 3 years or a guy that you're hoping can eventually be good? I'm going to draft the guy that's been really good at playing football.
Yeah, well, especially if you're a team now like Washington drafting at 29, who's like, we need guys who can help us right now because we're trying to win.
Your window's open, so you need, and I use the Rams as a good example of this, and the Eagles. You need guys who can have that impact because you're there. Like, your window's open. You're in the NFC Championship game, for crying out loud. Like, it's there. If you're going to take on projects, you do it on day 3.
Matt Miller, ESPN, with us here on the Hoffman Show. So the running back class this year is super interesting. It seems like it's very deep, very versatile. There are a couple guys at the top, obviously, Genty being the cream of that crop. But is there a guy? If I tell you, or if I'm Adam Peters now, and you're a scout in that commander's room, and we're having our draft meetings, and I go, hey, we need some running back with some juice. Anybody got one? Who's your guy?
O'Marion Hampton from North Carolina. He's got juice for days, but he's 225 pounds, and he catches the ball well out of the backfield. So he would be that guy. But
if he's a guy that, like, they would have to look at 29 if he even makes it that far.
Yeah, he's at 29. Travion Henderson from Ohio State, now that he's healthy, gives you that juice. Jaden Blue from Texas in round 3 would give you that juice. Like, there's one in every round. Like, we could go down the list. R.J. Harvey from UCF.
Can we unpack that for a second, though, for fans then? So if they've all got juice, right?
Yeah.
What makes one a first-round guy, one a second-round guy, one a third-round guy?
It's more the complete picture of everything that they have. You know, like Ashton Genty, it's power and contact balance and vision and production, and it's everything. You know, with the Jaden Blue from Texas as an example, well, he's got fumbling issues. You know, and so that's why he's a round 3 guy, because he doesn't run through power very well. He has a tendency to drop the ball, but when you throw him the ball in the backfield, and you can watch I think it was the Clemson game, like he can scoot, like he can make things happen with the ball in his hands. So, but it's a guy like that where maybe they're not a number 1 running back, or they have a fumbling issue, or they're a little bit undersized to be a number 1 guy. I think that's where they start to slip a little bit.
On the secondary front, Washington's also probably looking for an outside corner. They might go nickel and just say, Mikey, you're an outside guy now. Like, we'll see. Is there anybody outside of, obviously, Hunter's in his own category, anybody that might be available at that 29 spot that you think could play opposite Marshawn Lattimore next to Mike Sanders still?
My guy is Trey Amos from Ole Miss, and I'm alone on him. I think he's going to be a good pro. I don't know if he's going to be a first-round pick. To me, he would be in that range. As Thomas from Florida State is right there as well. He had a good Senior Bowl week. He's great in press coverage. He has the length to be an outside guy. He showed at the Senior Bowl that he has that makeup speed that you need in man coverage. So if you stick at 29, I think both those guys would be in play.
Is there anybody in particular that, if I ask you the question, whose testing matters a lot this week, that immediately jumps to mind? A guy that maybe right now is kind of being more end of the first round, maybe in the second round mock, that might wind up being in the late lottery, to use an NBA term, range-wise.
Yeah, well, I think it's Luther Burden from Missouri, who I love. Okay. He's my number 1 receiver, but again, I'm alone on that. I think his testing and interviews is going to matter. He needs to show that he's healthy. He needs to run well because he put on a little bit of weight and strength over the past year. I think he needs to remind folks why he was a 5-star coming out of St. Louis and why, he was such a huge impact for Mizzou the last 3 years.
All right, and then my final question for you, my favorite question to ask all the draft guys is, who's your guy in this draft? Like the guy that, if I tell you, you can just spend the next hour watching tape of anybody you want. Not because you need to, just like you want to. Who's your guy?
Jalen Walker from Georgia, because he's just a heat-seeking missile. He can play everywhere, and he does everything violently. So he's a little bit of a throwback.
I love it. Matt Miller, ESPN. You can watch him on all of their draft coverage on TV. That's why he's wearing the suit. Also, the mock drafts, etc. on ESPN.com. Matt, good to see you, man.
Yeah, likewise.
This is the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and the Odyssey app.
the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We're streaming live on YouTube too at the Team 980. Coming up, 5 o'clock. TBD still. We're going to cover one of the top stories of the day. We're either going to cover the Matthew Stafford contract restructure with Clinton Yates. Clinton's nice enough to stand by for us and see what we got for 5 o'clock. So we might have Yates at 5 talking about the Stafford extension or the Stafford restructure. If not, we're going to have someone talking about the Deebo Samuel rumors and whether or not he might wind up in D.C. 5:30, Dane Brugler, The Athletic, their lead NFL draft analyst. We got a weekend preview later on in the show as well. So we got plenty of good stuff to come. Lance Zierlein, Cynthia Freeland. So we're locked and loaded here on a Friday. Right now, though, Anthony, let's get an update on the Freak Show. And by the Freak Show, I mean the NFL Combine. And to be very, very clear, I am saying Freak Show as a compliment because some of these dudes that are running today and jumping and all the rest are putting on an absolute show out at Lucas Oil Stadium in Indianapolis, including not just the running, Anthony, but the jumping. I'm trying to remember who. One of the guys I sat down with out there said his guy in this draft. It might have been Sycamore, who, by the way, Trevor Sycamore, Pro Football Focus. You can listen to that interview on Take Command, me, him, and Logan. But said Nick Amanawari, the safety out of South Carolina, was his favorite guy, and just couldn't wait to see him test. Well, so far so good. He had a 43-inch vert today.
Oh, my gosh.
11.6 broad. God. This man is 6'3", 220.
That's insane.
He is 6'3", 220. And look, I want to make very clear. There is athleticism that, like, I enjoy seeing these guys just absolutely blow your mind in terms of what they're capable of. And then there is also, like, are they good football players? I am not going to be the person. I refuse to be the person that's like, oh, well, now he's a first rounder. Because just because you can win the track meet doesn't mean you can win the football game. But damn, is it cool that this dude is 6'3", 220 pounds, has a 43-inch vert and an 11.6 broad jump. He'll run the 40 in a little bit. By the way, whatever it's worth, Lance Zurlein, who, again, NFL analyst for NFL.com, who writes up all of the comparisons and the overviews and the scouting reports on NFL.com. So when you, like, click the prospect profile and you scroll down and the analysis piece, that's Lance. He's going to join us at 6:30 / join me in Indy, and we're going to play it at 6:30. He said his NFL comparison's Jeremy Chin.
Ooh.
So
Swiss Army knife. That guy can do it all.
Super explosive. He says wingspan and ball skills are like a 5-star wide receiver. Weaknesses: drift through games without urgency, inconsistent downhill trigger and run support. So, like, I got a long way to go as a football player. But oh my God, his athleticism score, insane. Speaking of insane, 40s are being run by the corners, and Maxwell Hairston, his The time's official now, Anthony.
Uh-oh.
It was 4.28.
4.28? Hold on, he ran it again?
I don't know whether they made the first time official or he ran it again and the second one was 4.28. But he hit 24.5 miles an hour.
Insane.
What was Worthy's time last year? 4.21?
4.2.
Xavier Worthy 40 time. Yeah, 4.21 last year. So Hairston misses that by 0.07 seconds.
That is it. That's fast, man.
And I'll tell you, like, again, I saw him out at Exos. I didn't get to see him work out at all, but, like, he just, like, walked by me. He was getting a smoothie at the at the smoothie bar. He's built exactly like Xavier Worthy. Like, he's got the dreads and everything. Just skinny dude who looks like he's fast walking. 5'11", 183, redshirt junior out of
5'11" running that. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, 5'11", 183. I would love to be 5. Well, I'm 6 foot, so I'm not gonna get there. And I'm an actual 6 foot, not a DC 6 foot. A doctor told me in my bare feet that I was 6 foot. But 183 is like he's a little smaller than me. He's running 4.28.
That's fast.
Sheesh.
Hey, Craig, that reminds me, man. We got to run a 40.
We do have to run a 40. I know.
When it gets warm, though. It actually doesn't feel bad outside.
No, it's actually not bad. Like, this weekend would actually not be a terrible time to do it.
Yeah, I'm just not going to be here.
Oh, where are you going this weekend?
North Carolina. Next weekend is also supposed to be said to be warm, though, so.
Maybe next weekend we do our combine.
Uh-oh. I'm ready.
I got to come up there. Got to come up. Also on the top performers front, you got oh no, I want live results this year. How about James Pierce, the edge out of Tennessee yesterday, running a 4.47? That's disgusting, man.
Yeah.
That's insane. That is nasty for an edge player. It was kind of funny. We were watching some of the coverage last night, and I was talking to Rachel about it, and I was like, "Yeah, we were at the D lineman." I was like, "If the 10-yard split number matters for them, but if any of these dudes ever run 40 yards in an actual game, something has gone horribly wrong." But you do want to pay attention when you watch the D lineman to the 10-yard splits because that is a measure of explosiveness. A lot of those guys are in the 1.8 kind of range. I'm trying to see where Pierce is real quick, scrolling down. Or Shamar Stewart was the fastest edge player, I believe. He ran a 1.58, which is sick.
In the 10?
In the 10. Yeah, you get some of the edges in like the 1.6s. The defensive linemen are running in the 1.8s, 1.7s, etc. But yeah, man, the explosiveness of these guys. Some of the linebackers tested really well in this. Jahad Campbell, who's an really interesting guy. I think he's probably going to wind up playing edge a lot more than he is off-ball linebacker. But he had a 1.53 split, so it tells you he's got some good explosiveness. The other drill for like pure explosiveness is the broad jump. I told you Amanawari, the safety from South Carolina, 11.6. Shamar Stewart, who we took in our Take Command mock draft 1.0. I think it's very, very unlikely he's actually there for Washington at 29, but he jumped a 10.11, so basically an 11-foot broad jump, which is absolutely insane. The other guy who's been a freak show in terms of edge players, Landon Jackson out of Arkansas, who Logan is a big fan of. First of all, he plays like an animal.
That's 6'6". The D lineman?
Yeah, edge guy, 6'6", 264. He's got 33.25-inch arms, so he's got really good length. But his athleticism ran a 4.68 40 with a 1.6 10-yard split. Jumped 40.5 vert. So he's 6'6" with a 40-inch vertical and a 10.9 broad jump at 265 pounds.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So he's a guy that definitely has not hurt his stock this week in the athleticism department. Tomorrow is the fun day of workouts, quarterbacks, wide receivers. One guy to definitely watch on the 40 for tomorrow, Marcus Golden from Texas, expected to run in the 4.3s. If he runs low 4.3s, I think he's probably off the board by the time Washington picks. If he runs in the higher, maybe there's a chance, but he's probably going to be off the board. But he would be a guy that if he's on the board for Washington, very, very interested based off of the athletic profile to get the speed receiver out of Texas to go opposite of Terry McLaurin. All right, we'll talk much more about the draft in half an hour with Dane Brugler. But coming up next, we're going to pull the Clinton Yates card because we can on a Friday. That's how we roll. Yates going to join us to talk about the Matthew Stafford extension, the top story of the day. So Yates is going to play the role of reporter/local insider out in L.A. for Not My Beat. Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always alive as well on the free Odyssey app. Dane Brugler from The Athletic, their lead draft analyst at 5:30. But top story today is that the first and largest NFL quarterback domino of this offseason has fallen, and we're lucky enough on a Friday to have the perfect person ready to talk about it. The Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We're streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980, where you see Matt Miller.
This just in.
Not my beat.
Clint Yates. Why is Clint here? Because it's Friday, and that's what he does. Of course, the host of Clinton and Friends on ESPN Radio. You also watch him on TV, read his work, and party on. In 3, 2, and 1. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Back from Indianapolis, but plenty of football news still happening and plenty to watch for this weekend. We'll talk in just a few moments about Travis Hunter with our guest, Clint Yates. Why is Clint here? Because it's Friday, and that's what he does. Of course, the host of Clinton and Friends on ESPN Radio. You also watch him on TV, read his work, ESPN.com. But Mr. Yates, we're going to use your LA-ness to get us started, because the big story of the day in the NFL is you're going to be watching the same quarterback this year for one of the home teams out there. Matthew Stafford and the Rams restructure the deal. So first of all, how are you doing on this Friday?
I'm doing well. We've been talking about this Matthew Stafford situation quite a bit. And I will say, not that I am a Rams fan, but my station is, in fact, home of the Rams. This is a thank God circumstance. I mean, we were discussing this because there were multiple options here. Number one was what happened. Number two was he goes somewhere else. Number three, though, was the offers get matched and Stafford decides to walk anyway. That was my main concern, is that he was going to be like, you know what? Don't really appreciate how you've treated me. I'm the one guy that's won a Super Bowl while this team was in Los Angeles. It happened in Los Angeles, no doubt. And you got the nerve to act like I need to be shopping around, like people don't want my services. Yesterday's price is not today's price. There was an element of that I was concerned about. That is not the case. They got him back. This had to happen if you're the Rams. I don't know what they were thinking, even letting him out of the building to begin with.
Well, so the thing is with them that's really interesting is they're kind of simultaneously on two timelines, and they had control in this situation because he had years remaining. He doesn't have a lot of guaranteed money. It was a kind of expensive cap hit, but they could have, like, there was no way he could have just flat out walked based off of where the contract was. We are still waiting at the time that we're talking to see exactly what the restructure is. But he certainly could have been like, oh, you thought we had a deal? That number that I said last week? Not so much. So there was definitely an element of that. But they've kind of got these bizarre two timelines. They were the team that played the Eagles the toughest in the playoffs. So by that nature, they feel like they can win right now. But the problem is they also have a bunch of young dudes that's kind of like a future timeline. And they've got to make sure that they've got the flexibility to retain some of those dudes. Some of those extensions are coming sooner rather than later. And I just think that, like, they're in a good, tough spot because they're kind of stuck between two places. But at the end of the day in the NFL, Clinton, I think if you can win right now, you should try to win right now. And Matthew Stafford undoubtedly helps them win right now.
That's what I'm saying. I understand what you're saying. And I say this all the time, Craig. I can come to a different conclusion from the same data set as other people. And I do. That's not two timelines to me. That's one timeline. And the reason why it's one timeline is because the previous timeline you had that ended up with the Super Bowl champion, that guy's still there. That's why it's one timeline. And here's the other reason why this was remarkably dicey for me, for the Rams. If you're letting him walk, if you're saying, oh yeah, go shop around, you're indicating off the rip, we don't actually have a problem if you leave. There's that alone. Here's the issue with that philosophy. It is predicated on the idea that you can do it without him, that you can do it somewhere with someone else, that the system works otherwise. Guess what? You already tried that. That guy now plays in Detroit because you had to go get Stafford because it wasn't just the system. That's where the logic fails for me if you're the Rams. It really was Matthew Stafford to some degree. That's what I'm saying. That's why I was like, dog, you can't let this get too far down the road.
That was a younger version of Jared Goff, and they did make the Super Bowl. So, like, the margin of didn't work. Like, did it not work? They made the Super Bowl.
The margin is Stafford, is what I'm saying.
But, like, Stafford now or Stafford 4 years ago? And like, here's the other thing. And like, you know Jordan Rodriguez, who phenomenal Rams writer for The Athletic. And I was listening to her talk about this situation earlier in the week on the Athletic Football Show with Robert Mays. And she had this unbelievable line. Jordan is like a literary genius. And so like this is smart. The way she describes things is so good. And she just goes, this is a hubris organization. And there is definitely a part of them that go, and Sean specifically, and Sean is a genius, but like sometimes with a genius, you have to figure out where the limitations of your own genius is. And like there is 1,000% a part of Sean McVay that is like, I can win with Jimmy Garoppolo. Yeah. And there is, by the way, a 100% part of me that, or not a 100% part of me. There is a 25% part of me that, from a pure experiment standpoint, wanted to see if that was correct.
Oh, don't get me wrong. This was going to be a media circus if he had walked away, and we would have had this kind of pressure on the team. But Craig, do you not understand my logic there? If you're going to argue that you can do it with other guys as the reason why you're letting this guy go, well, then what happened the first time? What happened? Oh, that's right. You had to get me. Do the math.
Well,
you know?
of course. And it's inarguable because, like, yeah, they won. And it's like, well, could they have potentially let Jared Goff improve and won with Jared Goff? The current version of Jared Goff? Maybe. Do you have a better chance with Stafford? Absolutely. And it's undeniable that they can do it with Stafford because they did. But also, is Matthew Stafford, like, one other thing that Jordan said that was really funny was, she thinks part of the reason they benched Stafford in week 18 to give him the week off was because they kind of knew it would piss him off. And they wanted like angry, super competitive Matthew. Yeah. Like she's like, this is my own conspiracy. This is 100% me throwing this out. There's my opinion. But like they knew if they wanted to get the absolute best version of Matthew Stafford, that him being a little bit angry for like a couple weeks and just going nuclear might be their best chance to win a Super Bowl. And he was but that's awesome.
That's a different matter than how this looks to the rest of the franchise. Let's take a guy like Verse, who all of a sudden is probably going to be their best player coming up on that. You think he's not going to look at this and say, oh, they treated their best player like this when it's time for him to re-up? I don't care about the future plans if the logic behind the current one is faulty. That's what I'm saying. I don't think that this ultimately comes out as a great look for the Rams front office. I can't believe I'm yelling this loudly about the Los Angeles Rams in February.
So the Rams restructure the deal. He's going to stay there. It's also, by the way, an enormous because this affects the Giants were in on him. There was another team that was in on him. But like now the Darnold, like I think if Stafford winds up going, the Rams are probably seeing, can we get Darnold for 10, 15 million a year less than we would have paid Stafford on like a 2-year deal, that money that expires, or that we have flexibility in year 3 when all of a sudden your boy you just mentioned, Jared Verse, Braden Fisk, they have to extend Colby Turner next year. Like these young defensive players that the Rams have, like those extensions will come sooner rather than later. So I'm sure this restructure still gives them flexibility to the point that you might be yelling about the Rams next February as well. But he'll be a year older and we'll see how he plays this year. And that's the thing, is like he played well enough to earn it again. It's not surprising to me they run it back, but there's huge ramifications for this in terms of what happens to everyone else. Darnold loses a potential landing space. Multiple other teams lose a potential quarterback option. And by the way, I also think this might have been the one place where I would have, if Aaron Rodgers plays there next year, I would have went, okay. I feel like maybe they can make it worse. And sir, you can count your blessings. You don't have to deal with Aaron Rodgers next year.
Thank you. That's what I was going to say. That's what the bullet we were trying to dodge the entire time. If you're telling me Stafford and Kupp for Devontae and Rodgers, no. I would have said no every time. That's what was going to happen. Thank God.
You don't want Rodgers would not run the organization the same way he did in New York, but I don't think he can play anymore. So that seems
correct.
Relevant.
Absolutely. Right.
Clint Yates with us here on the Hoffman Show, of course, host of Clinton and Friends on ESPN Radio, emanates every morning from Los Angeles, also does the locals out there on 710 ESPN in LA, writing for ESPN.com and Anscape, where you did quite a bit of coverage of Colorado football over the past couple of years, Clinton, and going into NFL Combine weekend, where the actual players will be on the field. We are still waiting to hear what teams think of Travis Hunter and which side of the ball he should play on. Can he play both? We know he's going to probably go in the top 5 of this draft. Do you have strong feelings either way on like the best both situation for Travis, which is something that most of us don't actually talk about because we just assume the team will make the call, and what teams might be thinking about when they look at him?
Here's what I think about Travis, and this is going to sound a little odd. I have strong feelings about no team having strong feelings. And here's why. I think with the Colorado program, it was easy to look at the glitz, the glamour, the hype, for lack of a better term, and say, oh, that's all that it's about. They're not successful. But for people that didn't see the inner workings of that program, they don't understand how they run their operation in terms of how that scales up to being a professional if you have those skills. So think about it. You know how much work you have to do beyond physically to be able to understand offensive and defensive schemes? Like, you've got to be a very smart football player, never mind a very skilled one. And we're not even talking about special teams either. So there's three sides of the ball effectively. Here's what I would do if I was an NFL franchise, and as we just talked about, very rarely comes up because of the hubris. I would just test it and say, what can he figure out? You're not that good anyway. Whoever's going to take him, obviously, at the number one, see if he can do it. It is worth your time and investment. If a player wants to learn both sides of the ball, whatever the position it turns out that he plays may be, to see how it goes. I think special teams has to be a part of what he does. That's a baseline given.
Talking about like kick returns, punt returns.
Yes. He will be playing two sides of the ball by default for me because special teams will be part of it, and I would stick to punts, not kickoffs. That's me. But if you end up finding a guy who really is that much of a football genius and really can, with the sort of a differing weight program, a kind of all year round situation, sustain the hits, why would you not let that happen? Why would you pigeonhole yourself just because? That makes no sense to me, although I think that's probably what some NFL team is going to do. Well, we see you there, so that's what we're going to choose. I wouldn't do that. You've got a chance to be a unicorn.
I wonder and like Dion would be able to talk about this, not only because he coached Travis and had to figure this out in college, but because he did it on some level in the pros. Like, the purely logistics of offensive and defensive team meetings are at the same time, and you're not going to stagger them so that, like, the offense is just waiting around twiddling their thumbs so Travis can figure out his defensive meetings, and then you can go. Like, you're not doing that. So, like, how do you actually teach him? Now, if he will probably be willing to put in the extra time, and if your coaching staff is, there are certainly ways around it on some level, but there is just the baseline level. He cannot be in two places at once. NFL schemes and playbooks are much thicker and deeper than college ones. And so it's not necessarily his mental capacity to handle it or not. It's how do you effectively teach him both? Because that's not a challenge you typically have to deal with. And where I've kind of sat on it is if you can make him a full-time corner with a limited offensive package. He's in there on third downs. We don't have to teach him the run game because he's not going to run block. Yeah. We can get him some jet sweep stuff, maybe on first and second down. But like generally speaking,
space options,
yeah. So generally speaking, he has a much more condensed offensive playbook that we can work on him with, and we can also in the practice field make sure he's a part of. Like, but to teach him a full NFL offensive playbook and a full defensive NFL playbook, it's just hard from a time standpoint. And to master the game plan specifics every week as well. Like, that's where I think it actually becomes more difficult, which sucks because you don't want to lose out of talent because you just don't have enough hours in a day. But, like, you don't have enough hours in the day at the NFL level because of how deep those books go.
That is a tremendous breakdown, and I agree with what I would do as far as implementation if given a choice. But I also feel like, I'm sorry, what else are y'all doing? You're NFL coaches. If this is not a challenge worth figuring out, well, then what's the point of picking him? That's kind of where I'm at with that, is that like, yo, you're just going to have to make the commitment. This is what we're doing. Hello, it's your job. And that's kind of what I feel like is if you can make these moves around a quarterback, which people do, they basically rearrange their entire situations to thankfully or hopefully, even though it's the worst coach position in the league, make sure that guy can play. This player is worth it to me. Maybe you do rearrange the way you do things. Maybe there is something that you want to reevaluate in terms of how you implement your game plans, what you teach and how you teach it. I think he's that special. I really honestly do, Craig. So yes, I agree with you regarding what would make sense within the current formatics of how coaches do things. But this is where if I were an owner or a GM, I would challenge my coaching staff. I would say, if you can't do both, because that's how we're going to figure out the best way to do one, then we don't need to pick him. You know what I'm saying? Because otherwise you're just not equipped.
Yeah, I think the other side of it too, he apparently wants to play corner. Dude, I would be like, Travis, you got to play receiver, bro. You see what receivers getting paid versus what corners are getting paid?
That's true, but
Purely on a financial decision.
Yeah, but
I
that
would be
also
wanting
comes
play
down to
receiver.
how many touchdowns you can score. You know what I'm saying? And he can score touchdowns pretty much every time he touches the ball. So I wouldn't be too worried about the money if I were him. Also, he's already rich. Like, what are we talking about?
That's true, but like, would you rather be the highest paid receiver or the highest paid corner?
I get what you're saying, but again, we're talking about a unicorn. It could be a situation where he breaks both of those records in terms of what we know. You know what I'm saying?
Well, if he's playing both, I would rather just be the highest paid Travis Hunter.
Exactly. Thank you. Precisely right.
Clinton Yates, you can catch him mornings on ESPN Radio. You can listen on the ESPN app. Watch it on the ESPN app as well. The show is called Clinton and Friends if you want to also search for the podcast. ESPN.com and Anscape. Television, he's everywhere. Plus, it's baseball season, so he's going to start popping up on your TV more in general as well.
You know what else it is?
What's that?
Women's college basketball season, UCLA, USC. I'll be there this weekend.
Oh, what day is that?
Saturday is the Saturday. Saturday is the Saturday. Yeah. Shouts to De La Soul. Gotta go.
And I do believe that transitions just nicely into our weekend preview, which is next. Clinton, you know who our weekend preview is brought to you by?
No.
Nobody.
Goodbye, Gregory.
Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Just over 5 minutes away from the Athletics' Dane Brugler breaking down the 2025 NFL Draft. We were going to do weekend preview here, coming off the heels of that tremendous ending to our interview with Clint Yates. Because, Anthony, who is the weekend preview brought to you by?
Nobody, Craig.
Yeah, still nobody. But again, we're available. Just get in touch. But because we don't have a ton of time here, and we actually have a ton of stuff to talk about, it's a heck of a weekend on the sporting front. Ton of great college basketball games, obviously the Combine, and there's some other stuff going on too. We're going to push that to a little bit later in the show, and instead pick up on the other last thing that we talked about with Clinton, which is the Travis Hunter discussion. Anthony, you were telling me in the break, you don't think that Tennessee will let him play both ways, but you think Mike Vrabel would. Why?
I just feel like Mike Vrabel, one, he'd be able to, elevate the defense with having Christian Gonzalez opposite of him, but also he'd be able to elevate the wide receiver room over there and Drake May's play. So I think it would just be a better situation for him in New England. I think if he goes to Tennessee, they just got so much that they have to, worry about. The quarterback position still, they don't know what they're doing there. They just have way more needs than a Patriots kind of team.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I do really wonder, and I think I'm right and Clinton's right. I'm right in that there's a logistical thing that most fans will never think of, which is the schedule daily in the NFL. And that is to go to practice and own the playbook is really hard for anyone, nevertheless a rookie. But it's really hard for anyone. I know Travis is a really, really smart football player, and Deion does things at a high level at Colorado, but it's different. The nature of pro versus college football, the depth of the playbook, the details, the way they game plan, it's much more intense in the NFL. And a lot of guys have trouble with it on one side of the ball, and they have all of these meetings and all of these walkthroughs and all of these practices to make sure that they get it right. Okay, well, how can you be in both at once? But also, if you are a team that's taking Travis Hunter and wants to maximize him, and you think he's that valuable, you kind of got to figure it out. Because in practice, he can play both sides kind of easily. You probably cut his reps on both sides, so that's on him to make sure he gets the most out of it. But at the same time, you can get it done because the ones are not facing the ones very often. Right? So if he's a one on both sides, well, hey, sorry, man, your practices are going to be a little longer, but that's what you need to condition yourself to play both ways in the game anyway. So let's get you some work with the one defense and then flip you over to the one offense when they're on the field, and you can figure that out. But how you literally divide your meeting time, and I don't know whether you record the meetings and then say, all right, hey, Travis, you're going to watch this. But then if he's got a point that he wants to make and he wants to participate in the meeting, he's not going to be able to, you can't be in two places at once. That is an unsolvable problem. But can you be both an offensive and a defensive player at once? I tend to think there's a way they can probably get that done on some level.
I think if he was a full-time DB and you just had packages for him, I think that's more than manageable just because it's not an entire playbook, offensive playbook that he's having to learn kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure. All right, Dane Brugler, he's got thoughts on the rest of the prospects. I don't think we talked about Travis Hunter a lot with Dane. We did get into it some with Cynthia Freeland. You'll hear from later on in the show. You also hear from Lance Zierlein. And we might have one more guest who is off his bike and potentially ready to join us in just a little bit. So we'll get that confirmed, or forget I said this. But Dane Brugler, 1,000%, is next on The Hoffman Show. That'll be on The Athletic about a month from now, probably. I'm sure you have the date seared.
Well, you just give me anxiety saying a month, but it's early April.
Early April?
Yeah,
okay, so you got
so much
more
to
than a
do.
month. You have more than a month. Deep breaths.
Yeah.
Woosah,
Yeah.
woosah. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app, streaming on YouTube too at the Team 980, where you see one of the guys this week, Dane Brugler, of course, the Athletics lead NFL draft analyst, and most importantly for me during draft season, the editor of The Beast, which I just wait to come out, not only for the information, but so I know how to say everybody's names right.
I've heard that more than a few times. That all the information in there, but
Amazing.
That's one of the most important things for just to understand the pronunciation. And look, the goal of The Beast is to be the one-stop shop, right? So
Yeah.
I'm happy that even if it's as simple as the pronunciation, people are getting something out of it. So that's
For
great.
sure. I will say one of the things that I really enjoy diving into, I mean, last year's the most intense draft work I've ever done for Washington because they had the second pick
Right.
and reboot and the whole deal. But, like, I remember reading about Brandon Coleman. I mean, like, this guy's story's amazing.
Yeah.
What's your favorite part of doing The Beast, and how do you go about, like, the actual, because there's so much actual reporting in there, like journalism reporting of these guys' stories. How do you go about collecting all that?
Yeah, that's my favorite part of this process is learning the journey of all these guys because they're all different. They all have different backgrounds. They have different, whether adversities that they had to overcome, all the different nuggets. Like, for example, Trey Harris, wide receiver from Ole Miss. He was Malik Neighbors' quarterback in high school.
That's incredible.
Trey Harris he wanted to go straight basketball, like going into high school. He's like, I'm going to just focus on basketball. Malik Neighbors was like, hey, I know I'm a good receiver, but I need someone to throw to me. He convinced Trey to get back on the team, and, I think it turned out okay for both those guys. Trey Harris then moved, once he got to Louisiana Tech, moved to receiver. But, just understanding all these different background stories are so much fun. Siobhan Ravel, corner from ECU, he's a top 50 player in this draft. If not for the ACL, he'd be a first rounder. I've got a feature coming out on The Athletic this week about his background. And the amount of adversities he's had to overcome is crazy. Sophomore in high school, he got in this bad car accident, should not have walked away. Skull fracture, broken nose, 28 stitches, and then has to go JUCO because he didn't have the grades. And then COVID happens in 2020, and he has no prospects. He's working at an Amazon warehouse, and he goes to an ECU prospect camp, runs a 4.40 in the 40, 39-inch vert, 11 broad, and they told him, all right, get your grades up. Your next year at JUCO, there's a scholarship waiting for you. He did his part, goes to ECU, has his breakout 2023 season, and Alabama wanted him, LSU wanted him, turns them all down, turned down a lot of money, stayed at ECU, ACL, September. And it's like, man, this guy, but if anybody can overcome it, it's him based off of what he's had to overcome. So Siobhan Ravel is one of those guys that the way he's wired, the way he's built, and learning about his backstory helps paint a picture of the type of player he'll be at the next level.
So that actually leads perfectly into a question that I'm asking everybody. I'm really excited to ask you on the heels of that, which is with what Washington did last year and the success they found.
Right.
Is there anything that changed or really clarified for you about NFL team building because of how dramatic the turnaround was? And I will, because of what we just talked about, I'll tell you my answer is like the character, the story, like that stuff matters more than I think I gave it credit for. I was always someone who looked at a lot of like you have to have the right scheme, you have to have you have to have the measurables. Like that stuff's just non-negotiable. And I look at the way Washington did it, and I'm like, you know what? If you understand the person, like there's a way to maximize their performance. And of course, you can't run my 40 time,
right?
But like within reason, that's huge. And so I'm curious, one, your answer to that, then I have a follow up off it.
Well, and it's even as simple as like Jayden Daniels is immensely talented, but the way he's wired and his mentality, like that's something that you cannot,
Did you had Caleb 1, then Jayden?
I had Caleb and then Drake and then Jayden. I mean,
would you change that now when you see like the wiring and like does that impact how you do it?
I mean, based on how the rookie years played out, I think you'd have to. I think you'd be very disingenuous. You'd be stubborn if you didn't. I mean, Jayden was just that special,
right?
But that's something that you don't necessarily know. Even the best quarterback evaluator out there, I don't think you really know that until you actually see him in the NFL and see how he operates in an NFL locker room. How do you operate in that type of setting? And once you get hit in the mouth, once you throw your first interception, how do you bounce back? And there's something to be said about who were the best rookie quarterbacks last year? It
Jaden
was
and Bo.
Jaden and Nix, two guys that were 5-year starters in college football. So having that experience, I mean, I think everyone talks about, oh, give me the 21-year-old, give me the young guy. How about the guy with the experience who's been through the ups and downs? And so when you go to the NFL and things don't go perfectly right away, you have to overcome some things, you're able to do that. And so I think that kind of, should change how you kind of look at the quarterback position a little bit, factoring in that experience and how important it is. So when you get to the NFL, you get hit in the mouth, you're not going to fold. You're just going to get right back up, and you're going to be stronger because of it.
Dane Brugler, The Athletic, with us here on the Hoffman Show. So the follow-up I have off of that is a lot of guys that are like, I would say, your colleagues, your compatriots across the different platforms. Like, they grind a lot of tape. They're very good at that. You also grind a lot of tape, so it's not that you don't do that. But how does the reporting and research element on the human beings, how does that separate you or make you different in the way that you think you evaluate prospects?
I think I'm probably just a little more curious than maybe some others about just all the background stuff and where they came from and all. I mean, the analysis is a huge part of what I do, no doubt. Finding out, okay, these are the strengths, these are the weaknesses, this is where he's at his best, this is where he needs to get better. Watching all of that tape is such a huge part of it, but then also understanding the context, understanding, he's a 5-sport athlete in high school, or, his family situation. And, it's not all of it's easy to dig up, but I still feel like it's doing these guys justice, giving them a chance to tell their story, and, understand where they're coming from. So I just find it extremely interesting. And I think in order to know where a guy's headed, you need to know where he's from. And I think it's really beneficial. And thankfully, a lot of people enjoy the beast, and a lot of it because of, not just because of the analysis, but also because of all the background information and learning more about all these players.
That'll be on The Athletic about a month from now, probably. I'm sure you have the date seared.
Well, you just give me anxiety saying a month, but it's early April.
Early April?
Yeah,
okay, so you got
so much
more than
to
a month. You have more than a month. Deep breaths.
Yeah.
Woosah,
Yeah.
woosah. All right, as for the guys that you're writing about, you look at the end of that first round, Washington's in the edge market, they're in the corner market, the wide receiver market, the offensive line market. How does the way the board likely falls the way you see it match up with those needs for Washington?
It'll be interesting how many edge rushers go in the top 25. This is not there's no Myles Garrett this year.
Right.
There's a really good one at the top of that, Abdul Carter. And then, there's a lot of, he's good, but, like Mikael Williams from Georgia. He's good, but he's still pretty raw in a lot of different areas. Mike Green led the nation in sacks this year, but, a lot of that came against Sun Belt competition. But he's fantastic. I love the violence that he plays with nonstop. James Pierce, if you take his best plays at Tennessee, you see a guy that should be a first-round pick, but it's not quite that simple with him. So there's a lot of pass rushers where it's like, yeah, he's good, but. And so how early do these guys go? And then what's left for Washington outside the top 25? One of the more interesting edge rushers, Donovan Izaraku from Boston College. Mm-hmm. He's long. He can be a two-way go guy. He can, and the last 2 years he has been productive, and the traits are there, but also the production's there, which you love to see with pass rushers. So I think he's maybe one of the more interesting, if we're talking realistically, who could be there. Izaraku from Boston College is one of those guys that I think would make sense for Washington.
On the offensive line side of it, obviously the kid out of Ohio State who had the injury,
Josh Simmons.
Simmons, yeah. Like, if he falls, it's going to depend on what happens, somewhere in a medical examination, somewhere else in this convention center.
No doubt.
And I know that, like, Logan Paulson, my co-host on the Take Command podcast, like, he's like, that's my guy.
Yeah.
Which, if you watch tape, pretty easy to get.
Top 10 pick if he's healthy. Yeah.
Right. So outside of him, is there anybody in that next group, like Campbell's going to be long gone from LSU, is anybody in that next group that you think could be around at the end that you think has a legitimate tackle chance? Because, like, a lot of these guys are, let's see what they can do at tackle, but at worst they're a guard. Is there one of them that you would be like, I'd be willing to bet $5 on that guy actually sticking at tackle?
the most interesting one is Donovan Jackson from Ohio State, who stepped into Josh Simmons' spot,
Right.
and was the unsung MVP of that national championship winning Buckeye team. He was a guard prospect coming into the year, but after watching his tape, it's like, okay, this guy is a tackle prospect. Like the way he's playing, we can't ignore that. He is a tackle prospect. So Donovan Jackson, I think, would be on the short list of guys that, like, he's a really good offensive lineman. I think he can stay at tackle. He's there in that mix. Josh Connerly from Oregon's another one of those players. He's a 3-year guy, 2-year starter, still growing, still kind of, you feel like he's ascending. So there's a little bit of, projection involved with him. But Connerly looks like an NFL starter at tackle. So those are the two guys that stand out the most that realistically could be there and give you potential starts at offensive tackle.
Last two things for you. One more position specific, and then just my favorite question asked draft guys this time of year. So, wide receiver, they need to add juice. If I tell you that's the qualification I'm looking for, is like they need juice in that offense. I know the running back class is really good, and they'll probably at some point address that. But at the wide receiver position, who is a reasonably available guy in the end of the first or second round, mid-third, that you like, that fits the juice category?
Jalen Noel from Iowa State. I think he's probably mid to late second, I would guess he's where he's going to go. You wish you maybe a little bit taller, bigger. He's about 5'10", 195 pounds, but he's got that juice where he's going to win vertically. But you give him a short pass and he's going to create with the ball in his hands. He's got really good ball skills. So even though he's a little bit smaller, the catch radius is bigger because he catches so well outside his frame. This is not a deep, usually every year, wide receiver is so deep. There's so many athletes.
You got a million dudes playing receiver now in 7-on-7. So.
Right. So corner and receiver, usually those two positions are just loaded. This year, it's just not quite like that.
Yeah.
Even in the first round, we'll see how many actually end up going to the first round. Would they consider if Emeka Buka falls to Washington in the first round, is that someone they'd consider, possibly? So it's just a really interesting wide receiver group. But if we're talking day two, a guy that I think will run really well here, Jalen Noel fits that description.
All right, my final question for Dane Brugler, of course, the Athletic. The Beast coming, but not in a month. It's a little bit more than that. You still have time.
Yeah.
You can check out the feature, though, that you mentioned earlier, coming soon to the Athletic.
Mm-hmm.
My favorite question to ask draft guys this time of year is basically like, who's your guy? Who's the guy that if you just sit down and you're like, I've watched all the guys I have to today. I want to watch someone that I want to watch. Who's the film that you're turning on?
Love Armand Membu, the Missouri offensive tackle. This guy is 20 years old. The body control, like there's so many different ways you can scout offensive linemen. Starts with the feet, and then you go up from there. But just the total body control from head to toe, the way he moves is so impressive. He's a tackle. Tape says he can play tackle. Some teams like him at guard, but he can stay at tackle. And in a class like this where, Will Campbell is probably the first offensive lineman, but not for sure. Membu, to me, is a guy that might get overlooked a little bit. He's going to go maybe 12th overall, something like that, and he's going to end up being the best offensive lineman from this class. It's
Dane Brugler from The Athletic. You can read all his stuff there. Dane, good to see you in person, and hopefully we'll talk to you later on in draft season.
Can't wait. Thanks, man.
What's up, kiddos? It's your boy Clinton Yates from ESPN. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980. Tell your mama I said what's up.
the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We are streaming live on YouTube, too, at the Team 980. The first time you're hearing De La Soul today, but not the first time you're hearing De La Soul today, Anthony, because we got a karaoke performance from Yates earlier. Unprompted. Love it. By the way, Anthony, do we have the actual, I don't know if you pulled this for real things so that you already have it, but do you have the sound, or should I describe what we're about to talk about?
I do not have the sound.
Okay, we didn't talk about that ahead of time, but sometimes Anthony is even ahead of me, so I just wanted to double check there. I should have done that in the break. That's my bad, so whoopsie daisies. But a couple days ago, Anthony Edwards was asked, do you feel like you are the number one candidate to be the next face of the NBA? And he said, no, that's what Wemby's for. And then last night, the face of the NBA for much of the last 20 years, LeBron James, was asked about it, and he said, I do not blame Anthony Edwards. I would not want to be. By the way, quick reminder, because I should have done this too, John Keim is joining us at 6 o'clock. So we'll get back to the Commanders in just a moment. And the latest on the Deebo Samuel rumors, Keim at 6. But LeBron James said, nope, and I don't blame him, and I didn't ask for it. That was put on me, and I understood what it meant and all of that. But he said, I wouldn't want to be right now because the media, the folks that cover the league, are super negative about our league all the time. All they do is S talk or talk S all the time. And Anthony, I actually had very similar conversations this week in Indianapolis about the NFL. Like the NFL Combine, as I kind of joked about when I was in Indy, in some ways is a giant media convention. And I was having this conversation with some of my media friends who I think do a good job. And that's part of the reason why they are my friends. I feel like there are some people in the NFL world, and the same is very much true in the NBA world, that just don't have respect for the game. They don't have respect for the people that play it. That is not to say you can't have valid criticism. That is not to say you have to accept everything as, oh, well, what they do is really hard, so I can't possibly say anything wrong. That is absolutely not true. And if you listen to the show, I criticize people all the time. It's part of the gig. But I try to do it in a way, and I think that the best do it in a way that is really respectful. A guy that I'll use as an example of someone who I think does it really well is someone we had on all season long. I think Dan Pizzuta of the 33rd team, who we had on every single Thursday this year, and actually participated in our second annual reporter roundtable that we recorded in Indy. It was me, him, and Brooke Pryor. We'll play that for you next week on the show, and we'll probably play parts of it and put the full thing in our podcast space and on YouTube, because it's like a 40-minute deal. But like, Dan is a guy that is very analytics based and watches a lot of tape. Didn't play in the league, never coached in the league. Like, he is self-taught. He worked for some other outlets, and he's super duper smart. But the way he presents the information is, hey, this is my opinion. This is what I see. It's not the gospel. And unless there's this other thing that could be happening, he doesn't present it as if he is all-knowing. And he doesn't present it as if there's no possible way that the thing that he says should happen shouldn't have happened. Like, there is a humility about the way that he does it, where I think there are other people with Dan's background, some of whom have much bigger platforms, in part because they play the game that someone like Dan refuses to play, of, I'm really excited, I'm talking about this thing, and I'm going to, and it's just like, yo, you actually don't know that? And even former players would not do that because they have respect for the game, right? And it's hard to be both passionate and accurate, but like, this is why Dan Orlovsky is the best analyst on television covering the NFL that does a lot of X's and O's, because Dan is both passionate, delivers things in an entertaining way, but has the humility to explain things, right? And this is where I think Logan is great. Logan, and if Logan Paulson, who played 10 years in the league because he was smart, had no business based off of his athleticism playing a season in the league, ever making a team, and he played 10 years in the league, can look at a play and be like, I don't know whose job that was. It was probably this, or it might have been this guy's fault if this, but it might have been that guy's fault if that. But either way, it's hard, and we should give the credit over here to this team that did the good thing. Like, if he can have that level of nuance and that level of respect for the participants, then folks who never played it down, myself included, should also hold ourselves to that standard. I just don't think that's crazy. But you're much better off, to make sure I'm punching up here, being Stephen A. Smith and pretending like the entire league exists to please you. It's my least of many things that I do not like about the way Stephen A. Smith does his job. That is my least favorite. For me, that guy's got a ba, 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 ba. I was like, oh, I'm sorry. Do the New York Knicks, especially, but all the other teams too, exist just to please you? No. No, they don't. They don't give a rat's ass about you. And I think for that reason, like, I genuinely agree with LeBron. Now, I know Stephen A. Responded to this today in a conversation, Anthony, that you were telling me about that they had, I guess, on First Take.
Mm-hmm.
And what was the pushback? Because I actually don't think that there isn't some merit to what was said in this conversation as well, as this is now, of course, being discussed on shows like that and like this all around, the NBA universe.
Well, Stephen A. was more so, especially in response to LeBron's comment saying, he doesn't blame Anthony Edwards for, feeling the way he feels. And Stephen A. sort of kind of was just like, dude, especially LeBron, like, nobody told you to go out there and, wear number 23. Nobody told you to sign a Nike deal. That was you trying to, chase greatness. That is, Michael Jordan. Everybody is trying to, be sort of kind of, I don't know, pursue greatness to an extent.
Yeah, but like, okay, what is that? Like, what does that have to do with anything? I think the part that's more interesting that they talked about was like, the 90s, and like, is there valid criticism of the NBA product today? Yes. It is very clearly not the best basketball we've ever seen. I also don't think 90s basketball is the best basketball we've ever seen. I don't need a bar fight disguised as a basketball game. I like some of the movement and the spacing and what happens on the court. But like, I was at Pacers-Raptors the other night in Indy. That game sucked. It was 51-41 at halftime. I watched a lot of bad basketball. Go Wizards this year. And that game was horrendous. But so the product is not beyond reproach. The players and how they approach it is not beyond reproach. But at the same time, like, you can be respectful in your criticism of the people that are out there playing the game that the coaches and the league have kind of designed by the rules and a million other things. So we'll pick that. That's a good topic for another day that we'll pick back up. But John Keim's going to join us next to discuss the latest going on with the Commanders' pursuit of Deebo Samuel. Final hour of the Hoffman Show here on the Team 980. Cynthia Freeland, Lance Zurlein, both from the NFL Network, going to join us in a little bit. But right now, it is our pleasure to welcome to the show our good friend John Keim, ESPN.com Commanders reporter, because the Commanders are being linked to Deebo Samuel in a report from Fox Sports. And John has been covering this story, including a great podcast with his colleague Nick Wagner, who covers the Niners for ESPN. So definitely for more after our conversation, if you want some more background, you can check out John's pod, the John Keim Report, with that. And we welcome in Keim now. John, Cakes, what's up, dude? How are you?
What up, Craig? How are you?
I'm great. I very much appreciate your time here on a Friday evening. And as I said, you've been following this. And it's funny, these reports this time of year, Schultz kind of advances the story in that it's like, oh, there's serious interest, which sounds like maybe there's been a few more conversations. But this is a story that's been rolling in slow motion. So what do you know about the Commanders' interest in Deebo, how real it is, and what kind of parameters would need to be in place for them to try to make this move?
Well, the parameters I'm not sure yet, but their interest is very real, and it always has been. Like, this is a guy they know well. I mean, obviously, from the time that you knew he was available and wanted out, like, this team was the natural link. And Adam Peters was a GM there when they drafted him, and Anthony Lynn worked there for 2 years as a running backs coach and assistant head coach. So they know him very well. They know the impact he can have when healthy. So the interest is real. And the question will be, the Niners, it sounds like, according to their report, it sounds like Houston is also interested. So that, and obviously D'Amico Ryans would know him very well, having coached in San Francisco as well. So that's what it sounds like. It could come down to those two. What I know is that this team is in the mix. That's what we know. And I don't know, like, the cost of it. It still sounds like it would be a day 3 draft pick. The Niners don't have a ton of leverage because they're not going to keep him. So the leverage is how many teams are involved and what would they give up. So that's where they get the leverage. So, because they're going to have to, they'll end up cutting him if they don't trade him. But if you have a couple teams interested, then I think something gets done.
They will cut him if they don't trade him. Could probably also be said about John Allen with Washington.
Correct.
Is that something where, like, the way the contracts are structured and the team needs potentially matching up, could John and Deebo and some kind of pick swap be something that happens?
As of right now, I don't see that angle. I think the Niners would be doing this also to kind of free up cap space for, if they're going to, it'd be a swap of contracts for them. I don't know that they would, I could see them maybe if John gets cut, maybe talking to him or pursuing him that way. I don't know that this would be a player for player trade. Just because, again, the salary cost for John on the cap would be, I think, what for a new team is $15.5 million, something like that.
Yep.
So I don't know that they would do that. Someone else told me that they didn't think that, but, like, until, as you know, with these things, it's hard to be absolute about anything at this time of the year. So I would just say I don't see that, but then it doesn't mean they wouldn't have interest if he was free. I just don't know if it would be, because then you might be able to control the price a little bit better.
Right.
But in this, and I think they have some guys in the line that they like that's cheaper, and maybe could give them something similar for less. But if you can get them cheaper, that's great. But I don't know that I'd see a player-for-player swap at this point.
So if Deebo Samuel were to wind up in Washington, we know that would be then a piece of their receiver room. The question I would have then is, like, what piece is he? Is he like, is that wide receiver 2? And then they're trying to fill out the rest with the Olamide Zacchaeuses of the world or whoever else. Is he like his own piece because he's kind of this chess piece, movable weapon type? Like, how does that affect what you think they would do in the rest of the receiver market?
I think you still have to go out and try and get another guy. I think he'd be a fun, versatile weapon. The funny thing is, like, every year you kind of hear that, you kind of wonder, like, how much does he want to continue doing both receiver and running back, because it does take a toll on a player, right? And it's not like he's carrying about 40 to 50 times a year. It's not like it's, 10 times a game or anything like that. But, but I think he does give you that ability. And I think in this offense, Cliff Kingsbury has shown that he can be very creative with how he uses players. But I would still say you would want another guy to complement both he and Terry McLaurin. But he gives you, as what they're looking for as much as like, can you add a weapon? That's what he is. If he's healthy, and he has, that's the big key here. If he's healthy, he is then a weapon. And so what you want to add to your offense is as many weapons as possible. So, but you could still, I think what it means, Craig, is that you don't have to go out and get, maybe spend more money on that position. You could always, you can look for somewhere in the draft to bring another young guy in. And plus, they have other guys that they would want to bring back in, Olamide Zaccheaus, whether it's Diami or Noah Brown. Like, I think you could still do something there. But I would want to add more, even like if you brought back Noah or whatever. And with Deebo, I'd want to get another guy in here just for depth. And you have guys that with injury histories there.
John Keim, ESPN, with us here on the Hoffman Show. He's such an interesting piece because he's so physical. And, as you talked about with Nick. Go ahead, John.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I apologize for interrupting, but the physical part is also another aspect here. And that was a huge thing for Kyle Shanahan with his receivers and something they want to bring here. And, I think that is a very understated but important part of what he would bring.
No doubt about it. And he's just a different body type. I actually saw him a couple of weeks, or like last week. I was out in Phoenix and was at the Exos facility, and he was working out. And I was just like, God, even amongst NFL dudes, like that is a big dude. And that's why he can do the running back stuff and all of that. So in the rest of the receiver room, John, as you've been talking to folks as we head towards free agency next week, you could tell me that Diami Brown makes $5 million next year. You could tell me that he makes $15 million next year, and I would believe you. Have you gotten any kind of gauge on where you think his market will be, a younger guy with real speed?
I don't, but because the hard part for him is that the production wasn't there until later, but he does, he does give you something, right? I think what he showed this year was the ability to, the screens. He was really good in the screen game. And he's, I think he gives you something, right? Coupled with the speed. And so do you trust what he showed down the stretch? Is that, who he will be for you? So I'm with you. Like I could see anything with him. I could see another, would he be another 1-year deal? Prove it, because just because what people have, are they going to look at the first 3 years or alone or not even? You can't look at it alone. But how much are you going to weigh that with this last year? But then you have to look at this past year. Well, now he's playing with a quarterback who can get the ball down the field. He can do different things, and he did do well in the playoffs. So that has to be a factor. So I could see him getting something better. But I'm with you. Like I don't have a great feel yet for his market. I'm hoping to get that more like over the next week or so to see what it really is. Because it's, I'm with you. Like he showed something and he does have skills. I mean, I really liked watching him on those screens. I mean, those were tough. Excuse my language, tough ass runs.
Yeah.
Am I allowed to say that?
Yeah, you can. That one you can say. There's some other stuff where the radio gets a little squirrely, and we could save it for a podcast. But that one you're safe.
There you go. Okay, good. But he does have those, and I think like there's something to be said for that as well, because not every receiver is going to run the way he did on those screens.
Now I just want to do like an uncensored football guy podcast on either our show or your show, but we'll save that for another day and not regulated by the FCC here on the radio. John Keim with us for another minute or two here on the Hoffman Show. Real quick on the way out here, John, the guys that we would think they're probably working on now, like the top of their priorities list, would be Zach Ertz, Bobby Wagner, and Jeremy Chin. Do you presume that any of those three get re-signed before the league year opens and before free agency begins?
I would think so, because they want them back, and so I would think so. Yes, I would think so. It's just, listen, man, it makes sense. We know they want them back. We know they want to be back. So things are in place for that. So I would be surprised if all of them hit the market, for sure. Because, I mean, I know with Ertz and Wagner, like I don't know what their market is going to be. I think Zach could have one maybe a little bit more because of position. And, I think with Bobby, I think it's, his value here is high and they know it. So, they want him back. They want Ertz back. I think they get something. My guess, Craig, this is a guess. My guess is they would get it done beforehand.
Yeah, I think it's especially with Zach. Like Bobby, I could see going back to the West Coast and just being like, hey, this was a great year. I'll be rooting for you guys from over here, but I'm going to get back. Like, I'm done at Howard. I have no reason to be on the East Coast anymore. Zach is like, I want to restart my career with Jaden Daniels. So I feel like and by the way, Cliff is the only guy he said he wants to play for the rest of his career, too. He's only got one place he can do that. So we'll see how that goes down. John Keim, you can check out the podcast, The John Keim Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And, of course, read him as news breaks and analysis is necessary at ESPN.com. John, appreciate it, sir. Have a great weekend, and I'm sure I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Craig. Always enjoy.
Same for me as well. John Keim with us here on the Hoffman Show. Two conversations, the last two that I've got for you from Indy, or I guess two of the last three that I have for you that were recorded on Radio Row in Indianapolis. Come at you next here on the Hoffman Show, starting with their analytics guru / analytics analyst. That's an important thing that will make sense in a moment. Their analytics analyst, Cynthia Freeland, next.
Today's women's sport.
You're going to lose us because we're not an anti-math show. We're a bad at math show.
Guys, we're going to be good at math here.
Okay, we're going to try. We're going to do our best for Cynthia. The Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Streaming live on YouTube too at the Team 980, where you see television, Cynthia Freeland, NFL Network, analytics, guru. Like, do you care what your official title is?
No.
Or you're just like, no, I like guru. Guru works for me.
I'm going to be honest with you. It became analytics expert because saying analytics analyst made people scared. They were going to say a bad word.
Oh, I just thought it was a tongue twister. Now I'm scared to try it. Although, truth be told to the audience, we're taping, so if I did say the bad word, we could just bleep it. All right, so you have maybe the most unique, like, there's so many different people in here with views on the draft, but because of the fact that you look at it
I'm a
through
psychopath,
the
yes.
no, you are not a psychopath. You are an analytics analyst. See, I did it.
Nailed it.
Radio
Nailed
professional.
It.
You like actually the reason I want to ask you this is because in your write-up in your mock draft for Washington, you're like, I'm surprised this happened, but this is what the model said. So like, how often does that happen for you, where because like you are surrounded by people that are looking at certain factors purely through like a film lens, or they get to know the person, like the human as a person, and you are going, the model says X. Like, how often does that kind of conundrum happen for you?
Well, by the way, I will say, this was before the news came out that a certain Alabama middle of the defensive line player said he might not want to be. Anyway, so.
Yeah, John Allen, his requested a trade. Her mock draft 1.0 was before that.
Correct.
Established
so
for the record.
I will say that because this is a great defensive tackle class.
Yes.
So that probably would have changed things. However, I just try to do a thought exercise that's a bit different. I don't want to take, like, if you want to go for, like, accuracy and rumors, look, Daniel Jeremiah, my colleague, he's amazing at that, but he talks to people and he gets, like, the real information on it. I just try to pair I use the thought exercise of trying to pair how many wins you'd get now should you pick this player with free agency in mind. So kind of win now, but with free agents also factored in. This doesn't really apply to you guys because it really just kind of takes the quarterbacks at the top and say, would it be smarter for the Giants, for example, to take a rookie or to take a veteran? And that's newsflash. I have them taking the rookie, which is surprising to me, actually.
Yeah.
But
why do you say? Let's unpack that for folks. Like,
Yeah.
why do you say, as the person who's like in charge of the model and doing the analytics and like?
it's like my model
yeah,
spitting
so,
back at me.
Yeah.
and my
So
information,
why is that then surprising to you?
Because the scarcity of the offensive tackle position this year is like there's not very many. Like basically it's LSU and then like the rest are all kind of a
huge question marks.
Will Campbell's his name, but I'm still in the college mode because I watch their film with a color, so I'm like LSU. So so ultimately the scarcity of that and how poorly they're lined. My model doesn't even like the guy that everyone thinks is still good, Andrew Thomas. My model doesn't even like him.
He hasn't played well for like 2 years, so that's is what it is.
It is what it is. So when I'm looking at that, I would think that the scarcity would put that ahead, and but it didn't. I was surprised by it.
Yeah. So this then becomes also fun to ask you because this is the question I'm asking everyone who sits in that chair all week, which is basically with what Washington did last year, which was so unexpected. Did you learn anything about how you can find success in the NFL, or did something get like extremely clarified for you? Maybe you had like a 2 out of 10 weight on it, and now it's like, oh, that's actually a 9 out of 10. So is there something for that? Because for you, that could, I would assume, affect how you actually build some of these models and like try to get it to spit out the right answers. Because like someone like Jaden, I'm sure, broke the model because he did stuff that we'd never seen a rookie do before.
Jaden was my number one quarterback. You can go back a year ago, and I did know that the Bears were going to take Caleb. I was told that, but in terms of numbers, because right now one of the key things that was verified by Jaden Daniels was the ability to throw on the run. And I'm not talking about like a little tiny jog, and I'm not talking about like not your feet not set. I'm talking about like full blown freaking sprint, like 8 miles an hour. Not 8 miles an hour is fast. That's a fast run. Like I can't run that fast, like consistently.
No, go put 8 miles an hour on a treadmill and see how long you
have fun.
last. Yeah,
and then try to throw a football with velocity.
Right.
Good luck. You know, those
and accuracy. Yeah.
Even just velocity.
Yeah.
Like it's like it's hard. So at the end of the day, that right now has been something that has been selected for valuably. It has worked. That works for them. I really did like the pairing of Cliff Kingsbury, Dan Quinn. I've never met a player that isn't like, I love DQ with all my heart.
Yes.
Like, so that stuff matters. And I loved the pairing of Cliff Kingsbury, who is able to then focus just on the offense, which is where he is very, very smart. And I loved the veteran presence there. Your veteran tight end is a big deal. Zach Ertz is huge. I love Terry McLaurin. I'm a huge Terry McLaurin stan. So
Same.
I think
since I was on the beat covering him in 2019 as a rookie.
Constantly underrated, and everyone was like, "Don't draft him in fantasy." I'm like, "Draft him in fantasy. You're going to be fine." But ultimately, I thought that I was worried about the O-line, but they had answers for it, and it was namely Jaden Daniels' legs.
And Eric Bieniemy not calling plays, but I don't need to dig up old stuff. Cynthia Freeland's with us here on the Hoffman Show on the Team 980. So, let's have that existential conversation then, as someone who works in the analytics world, because one of the common criticisms of analytics, and I don't feel this way, I'm just presenting the argument so we can talk about
I've heard
it,
them all.
I think it's fascinating.
Have you ever read my Twitter mentions? I've heard them all.
Oh, God, I don't want to imagine what's in your
It's
Twitter
fine.
mentions.
It's fine.
The analytics can't measure heart. They can't measure this. And the old school nature.
You don't know anything about football. You never played.
Well, there's that one. But the idea of the character, the humanization of the game, because it's played by humans, it's not played on a spreadsheet. And to hear you glow about someone like DQ, who it embraces analytics.
Matters.
And but to understand that guy's going to get more out of the player than another coach would. Is there a way to factor that into models? Is it something that then you just interpret the model with the analysis, and that's why you can't just look at the output of a spreadsheet and assume that everybody can look at that spreadsheet and draw the same conclusions? How do you manage that part of it?
So, to me, it's garbage in, garbage out. As someone who makes a model, if my coach is saying, these are the things that I value, these are the attributes that I want, this is how I want my player to succeed. That's the perspective that a guy like Dan Quinn and Cliff Kingsbury come from. How do I make them succeed? And Adam Peters, for that matter.
Yes.
How do I make my asset better than they could? How do I use select for their best traits, not for all of their traits, but how do I push them into the areas that are best for them? So if a coach tells me, this is what I like, third down efficiency, rushing with it, whatever you want, right? You can create a model that therefore reflects their values. And what that does is it surfaces. So for quarterback, this isn't a great one, but let's talk about your sixth O lineman, right? These are areas where you can take someone who's average and in your system find the people who are a bit above average that you're not overpaying for, because you have to get quarterback right. Great. You have to get. Corner will be a great situation for you guys, right? You get Marshawn Lattimore's full season of healthy, presumably, right?
Yep.
But that'd be great. You got that's a free agent acquisition, just made it last year, and then maybe you can draft whatever. So point being is, how do you find the traits that you want and select for them in your environment? And then, by the way, respect things like Zach Ertz's veteran presence. He had a great season from a number standpoint, but I would argue that his value is significantly higher for the coaching aspect that he brings to the on-field. Line up over here. No, over here.
Right.
You can see it ahead of the snap.
He's a force multiplier.
Exactly. But it maybe isn't in a stat or something that I can measure, but if you watch, you could measure that even. And so the thing is garbage in, garbage out. If I have great inputs into what if good stuff in, good stuff out, right? If you're telling me to focus on these things and surface more like this, I can make you 10% better.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to
It's why I've always liked the tool analogy for analytics.
Exactly.
It is a tool.
Yep.
And if you're a good carpenter.
I got a new analogy for you.
Okay.
Compound interest.
Okay.
Okay. if you
you're gonna lose us because we're not an anti-math show. We're a bad at math show.
Guys, we're gonna be good at math here.
Okay. We're gonna
need
try.
this for
We're
life.
gonna do our best
Okay.
for Cynthia. All
so
right, let's go.
if you're getting an 8%, 10% increase. Let's just do 10%. It's easier.
10%'s easy. That's my level.
8 years, your initial investment doubles.
Okay.
So if I make you 10% better every game, 17-game season, it's about a game and a half better, which is a big deal.
Yes, 100%. The reason I like the tool analogy is if you're a bad carpenter, it doesn't matter.
Nope, correct.
Right. What kind of tool you're using.
That's right.
If you don't know how to use a saw, then you don't.
Then maybe don't pick up the saw.
Exactly. And I feel like that's a lot of times coaching. And one of the things that I've, as I'm having these conversations this week and thinking about team building more than I ever have, because not only what Washington's doing, but or the Commanders are doing, I should say, but the Wizards are in the middle of a rebuild, and all of DC sports is hey, how do we build a team? And it's just I don't know. The answer seems to be good at your job. It's just, hey, Adam Peters is a good scout. Dan Quinn's a good coach. There's no formula. Sure, you can say
Adam Peters is a good scout, but Adam Peters is better at communicating what a commander is.
That's also 100%. And not to pick on Ron, but Ron would say many of the same things and could not execute on them. And that is ultimately the difference of who is using the data, who is using the formulas, what conclusions do they draw? Just because you have all of the information in front of you doesn't mean you actually know which things are important.
Which part of it are you using?
Exactly.
A lot of signals, a lot of noise.
Cynthia Freeland, NFL Network, NFL, or I should say draft. Well, I guess right now you're draft analytics, but in general, analytics guru, not analytics analyst, because that was too hard to say for other people. With us here on the Hoffman Show, we got another minute or two here. My other favorite question to ask all the draft folks this week is like, who's your guy in the draft? And so for them, the people that are much more purely tape grinders, it's like, if you could flip on the tape of anyone, who would you watch? Do you have an answer to that, or is there like someone that you would say, based off the models that I've built, like that's the guy that I'm circling as my guy?
Travis Hunter is, I mean, I'm sure everyone's been saying that. He's just such a unique player.
Right.
112 snaps a game.
It's insane. It's harder than running 8 miles an hour on a treadmill.
And the fatigue level doesn't go down.
Yeah.
Like, what is he eating? I need to know. I need to get on his diet.
I need to also be 20 years old again. That would probably be helpful.
Overrated. But yeah. So, but look, obviously he's the most unique draft prospect. I would tell him to play wide receiver.
Interesting, because I feel like a lot of people say corner. Why do you say wide receiver for Hunter?
To be fair, I like defense better in life. I would be a mean safety. That would be my that's what I would like to be.
When people at parties are like, "Oh, what position would you play?" You're like, safety.
I'd be Brian M. effing Branch.
Let's go.
Yeah, I'm from Michigan, so I'd
Makes
have
sense.
to give a Michigan answer. But look, like, no, I think that for two reasons. One, the scarcity in this draft of wide receivers. That's the first one. Two, the scarcity of wide receivers in free agency. That's the second one. So I would be a wide receiver. But also, I always think you can do the less hard thing, and I think it's harder to catch the ball than it is to not catch the ball. So I like corners, don't get me wrong, and I like defense, but I think
it's a funky position, though, in this league.
It's a funky position. So I just would go where the money is. To make it keep it
that
simple.
also makes sense. If I'm
Keep
Travis
it
Hunter,
simple.
I probably want to play wide receiver, especially let's see what T gets. Let's see what Jamar is about to get. It's going to be a whole lot of cash. Cynthia Freeland, you can watch her on NFL Network. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks
Appreciate
for having
you.
me. Nice to meet you.
Hey, this is DA, and you're listening to The Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and the Odyssey app.
He's safe, young, he's strong, he's technically sound. There's a lot of things to love about him, and his age is one of them.
It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app, streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980. And for the second straight year, our pleasure to welcome back to the show here on Radio Row at the NFL Scouting Combine, Lance Zierlein, NFL.com.
I remember you had a whole list we went through offensive linemen, I think, last year, didn't we?
I think we
we
probably
were
went
looking
through.
at the second or third round. We were trying to get some help. You made the right choice at quarterback.
Yep, you were a big Jaden guy. I remember
a big
talking.
Jaden
That's
guy.
what I remember from our chat last
Yeah.
year. Was I literally had someone else sit down and say, "You got to take Drake May. Why? Because look at the tape." And you were like, "Jaden Daniels. Why?
If
look
you were
at the tape."
actually watching the tape, it wasn't even close. It was Jaden over Drake. And frankly, Jaden had better tape. Jaden and Bo Nix had the best tape last year. But Caleb had, I mean,
you can
there's
see
things-
why people like Caleb. You see why
see
people
the
like Drake.
flashes.
But like
See the
the
flashes.
consistency and everything obviously bore out this year.
No, Jaden was, and now you have to. He's a slender body guy, so you got to stay healthy. And there's some, you still have some concerns. You're not out of the woods. You still have, he's still going to run. You still want to make sure he learns to slide, get down, avoid big contact. But he's special. I mean, he's just got special talent.
For sure. So you were saying offensive line, though. That's what you remember from us chatting last year.
Well, no, we did. I just remember we were looking at help also because you had multiple second-round picks, I think, right?
Yeah.
Or multiple day 2 picks,
Multiple
I believe.
day 2 picks, and then they ultimately wound up with 3 second-rounders with the trade with the Eagles and DeJean, and they got Sainer still and Sinnott and the whole deal. So, but they wound up with Coleman. So they did that. They're definitely in the offensive line market this year, sitting there at 29 and
not
29 again.
Not a great year to need O-line. I mean, it's not bad. Well, okay, out of the first round.
Yeah.
But I think in the first round it's a little tougher because I've looked around for offensive linemen, and I just think, I think you're reaching a little bit with tackles. I think there's going to be probably 2 to 3 tackles off the board by the time it gets to Washington, and from there I'm trying to decide, am I going need or am I going best player available? Typically I lean towards best player available, but there are some interesting tackles where you got decisions to make about, are we going to keep him at tackle or are we going to move him into guard?
So that's what I wanted to follow up with you on, because I think Washington could go either route. I think Washington could say, Brandon Coleman's our left tackle. We're staying at left tackle. And even if you bring Andrew Wiley back, like $10 million is not a ton for a starting tackle in the NFL. And Andrew Wiley, can you upgrade on him? Absolutely.
Yeah.
But you're not dead in the water with Andrew Wiley, as they proved last year. They made the NFC Championship game with him, and the Chiefs won a bunch of Super Bowls with him. So you definitely could look at left guard and say that's where we want to actually make the big investment. So is there one of those guys that you really like as like a starting caliber guard that you say, if Washington takes that guy at 29, you're getting an A from me?
I like Donovan Jackson from Ohio State. He played some tackle, so he had to in a pinch. They lost their starting left tackle, Josh Simmons, and they lost their backup. So they're in their third, and he said, I'll step out and play it. And he did an admirable job.
Which, by the way, is a very similar story to Brandon Coleman at TCU.
Very similar.
Very similar story.
Yeah, and so, I thought his run blocking is really good on tape. He's tough. He's got pass protection experience as a tackle, and which I love because nowadays you want to be able to defend the interior because there's so much twisting in games, and everyone's looking for, it's a good defensive tackle pass rush. So you're going to have teams stocking up on defensive tackles that can play a little bit, and then in defensive ends that they'll sub-package, they'll reduce down inside, which brings up its own set of problems and concerns. So I think Donovan Jackson would probably get an A for me because I think it's a good pick. It's a fit. I think the value is good. I don't think it's too big a reach. I think late first and early second is where I have him. The tape is good. He starts right away. He potentially upgrades. I think it's and he's tough. You always want to make sure once you have a good quarterback, you want to make sure you tighten up the running game because you don't want to put too much on their plate year after year after year. It just gets too hard.
So speaking of the running game, that's another good place to go in this draft, and actually like a very, very good place to go in this draft by most evaluators. Lance Zierlein, NFL.com. Again, Lance's claim to fame. You're like, I know that name. Why? Because he writes every single one of those summaries that you see at the bottom of a scouting profile on NFL.com this time of year. So that's your guy right there. This running back class seems like it's deep. It seems like it is. There's a lot of variance in it. If you want a power back, there's power back, speed back, there's speed back, scat back, there's a scat back.
Yeah.
What, like, is there a guy that you think is, I don't want to say this year's Bucky Irving stylistically, but a guy that could come in, start right away, and have a huge impact on a team like Washington?
Well, I mean, there's lots of guys. I think Omarion Hampton could potentially be that guy. There's a guy that I like a lot out of Virginia Tech, Bayashal Tutin. Is a player that probably is a day 2 running back that
let's double click on him because we have a ton of Hokies fans that certainly listen. We carry some Hokies basketball and football in the station.
Something like 38 touchdowns over the last 3 years, rushing touchdowns. He's had 2 different 1,000-yard rushing seasons. He had an injury his junior year, so he didn't get to 1,000, but he was an 1,100-yard rusher his sophomore year. He hit the 1,000-yard mark again this year. He has track speed. You know, he's going to run probably in the low 4.4s to high 4.3s out here, so he's got breakaway speed. I thought he was a competitive runner, meaning he was physical when he needed to be physical. He had a little bit of, he really created through power and through speed, and he can catch the pass a little bit. He did it more so, not as much this year. He had less than 100 yards receiving, but in his background, he's got over 300 yards receiving in a single season. So he's a guy who can play all 3 downs. You can get him on the second day of the draft, and I think he can become a future starter. But there's a lot of those kind of stories, as you mentioned. I'm looking at 29 and I'm saying Hampton, but Travion Henderson is the one that's going to really excite people because everyone wants what was big the last year, right? You wanted, what did the Eagles do? What did the Lions do with Jahmyr Gibbs? Is Travion the next Jahmyr Gibbs? I don't think he is, but I think he's got some of those elements. And so for me, Travion Henderson from Ohio State, he comes in and adds another layer to the Washington offense. Now I got a guy who can hit home runs because he and Quinshon Judkins were in the same backfield with the same offensive line, yet one guy averaged 2 yards more per carry. And that's Travion Henderson. That's the home run hitter. So you want a hammerhead? Go ahead and get Judkins. You want a guy that's got a chance to play all 3 downs and mismatch people out of the backfield? That's Travion Henderson. Choose your poison.
Lance Zurlein with us, NFL.com, here on the Hoffman Show. In there, you talked about some guys that their 23 tape, their 24 tape is a little different, and maybe the 24 tape is not as good. How do you make sense of that? Because it seems to be a theme for some top guys, like a Luther Burden, at the wide receiver out of Mizzou, right? Like everyone's like, his 23 tape, excellent. His 24 tape, like I got to figure out what was going on there. So,
tell you what was going on?
It was hurt for part of it.
Quarterback was terrible. His same quarterback was so much better in 23 than 24. It's because I realized that once I watched, because I watched all his targets in 23 and then all his targets in 24. And then I hyper-focused on, he had caught a ton of hitches. That's not his choice. They just threw him a bunch of hitches and short stuff. So I eliminated all throws inside of 9 yards in the line of scrimmage, and I watched all throws 10 to 19 and then 20 yards and beyond so I could get a feel for what he would look like as a pro wide receiver. And, so I watched all these targets to him, and then I went and watched Brady Cook, the quarterback, because I had to write him up because he's at the combine. And so I start with 23, and I start with 24, and I'm like, oh, this is bad. This is really rough. Then I went to 23, and I'm like, holy cow. It's a lot better. Yeah, it was a lot better. And so I think part of it was what the offense asked him to do. Too many people are box score scouting. They look at the production, and it's not as good. What happened to Luther Burden? I watched the tape, and I'm like, nothing. Luther Burden looks good when he's going up for the ball and challenging people on contested catches, and his ability to win deep, even though they say he's not going to run real fast. He plays fast. So I think Luther Burden is one of those players that – so to answer your question.
Yeah, so ultimately, if say it's not Luther Burden, but there's a guy whose the tape is different year to year, how do you try to make sense of that, especially when the worst tape is more recent?
I had that with Quinn Ewers. So with Quinn Ewers was interesting. I actually wrote Quinn primarily off the 23 tape, and then I factored in 24 decision-making, things like that.
For those that don't know, Quarterback Texas.
Quarterback Texas, yeah. And so I did that with, there's Harold Cross, I think, Howard Cross's son, who's at Notre Dame. better in 23 than 24. It actually happens more times.
Safety
than you
from
may
Georgia,
think.
I think, was kind of the same.
Malachi,
yeah.
but that's because they asked Malachi Starks to play in the slot more, and he's not really a great corner guy. He's better playing safety. So when I went back and watched him as safety, I'm like, oh, okay, I actually see it better.
Yeah.
So that's a really good question because I go back 2 years. Not everyone will go back 2 years because it takes a lot of work. That's what I get paid for. And what you do is it really changes from player to player. It depends on what you see, because what you'll do is you'll factor in 23, or you'll say, okay, Malachi Starks, I don't expect them to play him like that. I'm going to go with mainly the 23 tape and not the 24 tape. It really depends on your health. It depends on your attitude. It depends on how a team played someone. Is it more likely that 23 is going to pop back up? And if I think maybe, or that may be the outlier, then I'm drifting away from 23. If I think, yes, I can see 23 happening again with a different team, because I always like to put you in the best position possible.
Yeah.
Like, if this player is with this team, what's he going to look like?
Last two questions for Lance Zurlein, NFL.com, with us here on the Hoffman Show. Also, make sure to check out NFL Network's Path to the Draft and all their great coverage of the 2025 NFL Draft. All right, these two questions I'm asking basically everyone that rolls through. First one, with seeing what Washington did last year and the unexpected success that they had, is there anything you learned from what they did, or that in like an extreme way clarifies something that you thought about team building and about how to find success in the NFL?
You know what? I actually, there is something, and it has less to do with draft day, and it has more to do with the head coach and the interviews that he had where he said, my second time around, I'm cutting it loose. You know, his first time in the batter's box, he was a little tight. His second time in the batter's box, he said, we're going for fourth downs. I don't have a care in the world. I'm with house money. I got a second head coaching opportunity. I'm firing away. And I think it's that playing to win. There's two types of people at a casino. I'm probably not supposed to say this since I work for the NFL. But there's two types of people in a casino. There's the people who get to a blackjack table and they get a little hot and they start putting chips back in their pocket, or they start going, they bet lower because they want to, minimize, they want to maximize their chances of walking away with a little bit of money. And, they're playing they're playing with house money, but they really want to just, okay, if I get to this amount, I'm leaving a table. Then you have the people who will lose big sometime, but they will win big like the other guy can't. The other guy can't win big because he won't take chances. I see it with quarterbacks all the time. Jameis Winston was the guy take the shot.
Yeah.
And Marcus Mariota in that draft was I'm just not going to take any chances. I'm not going to cut it loose. Dan Quinn basically said, you know what? I'm going to cut it loose. I'm playing with house money now. So what that did for me is I realized if you want to build a team of winners, sometimes you have to have a winning kind of screw it mentality, but not in a
It's not an arrogant way.
not in an arrogant way, but also not in a careless, reckless way.
Yeah.
He's basically saying, I believe in you guys, because once you go for it, you're telling them I believe in it. John Harbaugh does it all the time with Lamar Jackson.
Right.
Sometimes I think he shouldn't do it. And there were times I thought Washington shouldn't do it, and then I looked at their success rate.
Well,
and
they were
like,
the best one in 25 years.
The best yeah. Is that what it was?
Yeah.
Best in 25 years.
Yeah, they were like 80-something%. It was the best in 25 years.
But you don't do that if you don't have a quarterback who's multifaceted.
That's what I was going to say, too, is like it's a lot easier to have that. It's not reckless because you have Jaden Daniels, and I think that's something that was also like understanding the strength of your team. And like for them, even though Dan's a defensive guy, they were an offensive football team. The best player on their team was 5. And they were like, how often can we put the ball in the game in 5's hands? And the fourth down is one of them.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like in basketball. If you have a really special player, you put it in their hands more.
Yeah, eventually you just call ISO and get the hell out the way.
That's what you did. And you called ISO with him on fourth downs, and more times than not, he got to the hoop and made the basket.
Jammed on people.
Yeah. Dunked on people or made a 3.
Last question. This is my favorite one to ask all the draft guys. Who's your guy in this draft? So if I tell you get to flip on any tape you want, I'm going to give you an hour. It's your, and you probably like I've watched enough tape. I would let her do something else in my hour. But I'm like, you got an hour in the film room. There's no one you have to watch. Whose tape are you flipping on in this draft? Or you just can't get enough of it?
Man, I can go in a lot of different directions here. I'm going to give you one. There's a lot of directions I can go. I'm going to give you one that's probably not real sexy, but Armand Membo the offensive tackle out of Missouri.
Yep.
When I watched him, I was like, Braden Swinson's another one out of LSU that I think everyone's too low on. Like, you better get on the Braden Swinson train.
Where's he at?
He's
like
a pass rusher out of LSU. Who's probably a day 2, second or third rounder, but I see him on an upward trajectory. Armand Membo is 330 pounds of good lean mass, not bad weight. He is about 6'3", I think. I got to see what his combine height was. 6'3", 6'3 and a half, 34-inch arms, which is good arms. The guy has great technique, great core strength, really tough, very physical, can play outside zone, which is a move-based system, or gap, which is more downhill and strong. So, I watched his tape, and I just came away thinking, I don't see a lot of bad reps.
Yeah.
Like, I just don't see a lot of bad reps.
You're not the only one, actually, that said that. There's been a couple of the guys that I think do a really great job that are like, watch that kid.
To me, he's the safest offensive lineman in this draft.
Which he's like 20, right?
And that's the other thing to love.
Like,
Most of these other guys are 23.
He's young. Yeah.
He's safe, young, he's strong, he's technically sound. There's a lot of things to love about him, and his age is one of them.
For sure. Lance Zurlein, read his work, NFL.com. You can also check him out on NFL Network's coverage leading up to the NFL Draft. Lance, always appreciate you. Thank you.
Good stuff. You know your stuff. I go to different, he knows his stuff. He's good.
I try my best. More from Indy next on the Team 980.
This is the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and the Odyssey app.
It's the final literal minute of the Hoffman Show on the Team 980. What a week it has been. 3 shows from Indianapolis at the NFL Combine. Appreciate Linnell. And then Doc was here on Monday, right, Anthony?
Doc was here on Monday, yes.
Yeah, I appreciate them. Actually, two shows from Indy, but a lot of today's show from Indy as well. Stuff that we didn't have time for earlier in the week. Dane Brugler, Matt Miller, Cynthia Freeland, on down the list. Lance Zurlein. Had so many phenomenal guests in Indy. A lot of our local reporters that were there, Ben Standing, JP Finley, Mitch Tischler. So it's great to see everybody spend some time there in Indy. We got one more bit from Indy for you. Our reporter roundtable we'll get to you next week, plus full combine recap. Logan and I will have more from you on Take Command as well. Trevor Sikkema interview already up there. Until then, have a great weekend. We'll see you next week. Have a great weekend, everybody.